Mindset Athlete Podcast, and I'm your host, James Roberts. I'm a two-time Paralympian and owner of James Robert Fitness, which is an online training, nutrition, and mindset coaching business. And each week on the Mindset Athlete, we like to bring you inspirational athletes, a message, or experts talking about human optimization to teach you how to change your perception of your mindset and become 1% better. And on today's show, I've got Carol-Ann Reid. Carol-Ann Reid.
Hi, you're right.
She's a transformational life coach, master NLP practitioner, author, and motivational speaker. As a behavioural change specialist, she helps awaken individuals to get clarity on their life purpose, release their inner limitations, and create a strategy for success. So welcome on to the show, Carol-Ann.
Thank you very much for inviting me on. I've been really looking forward to this.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine. So before we delve into today's episode, Carol-Ann, can we go a little bit deeper than the introduction that I gave you? And obviously we spoke recently before coming on and doing the actual show, and you were talking about your background within dance, if my memory serves me right. Yeah. And how has kind of the athletic background for you more specifically enabled you to, on the one hand, give you that clarity and probably resolve into your business, but able to kind of get over what in a sense is the day in, day out of what everybody's going to experience from a perspective of fear, anxiety, and stress?
Good question. Okay, so yes, you were absolutely bang on the money. So my background, like back in the day, as my very Yorkshire mother would say, is very much around dance, performing arts, and then I sort of transitioned into the fitness industry. And for me, it was a passion that I had from being a kid. I absolutely loved to perform. And as much as that showed on the outside, actually the inside was such a different world. It was crazy. Like, always doubted myself. As confident as I may come across when I was on stage, I would always have this like inner fear. It was mad when I look back at how many years I was actually in turmoil to some degree and internally. But because I loved it so much, I showed up relentlessly. And I actually am grateful for having that kind of mindset back then, when I kind of look back and reflect, because it made me give 110%, not just 100%. Do you know what I mean? I always thought, well, if someone like me from little old Macclesfield is going to be able to travel or be in a big show or do this, I have to be relentless with rehearsing, with showing up, because I left school and that was it. So I never went to college, uni, anything like that. So I was working alongside these big professionals. So in my mind, I was a little bit like, I almost put myself under them. But I'm so grateful, because then I had to give 110 and it took me to where I wanted to go. And I'd say that through the dance and the fitness, probably the biggest benefit that's come from it mindset wise, aside from like a personal growth side, it would be personable skills. Actually being able to read people, if that makes sense. So if I'm helping someone with their fitness, let's say, I'm able to read their body language, even if they're saying like, oh, and their body language is slumped and they're going, oh, but I'm really tired today. I'm like, no, you're not tired. Something's weighing heavy on your mind. Like, it's very rarely the body is the problem. It tends to, well, as we know, so much of it comes from up here. So it kind of enabled me to cut through the crap. Can I say that? Yeah, said it. Okay. Kind of to cut through it and then be like, it's not really what we think it is on the outside. It will all stem from back here. So I'd say that was probably the biggest kind of revelation that I've had from a mindset perspective in the fitness and health sort of industry, I'd say, for a coach.
But you were saying there that, or can I say that? Well, I think you got to own it, haven't you? In terms of once it's out there, you got to.
I'll be dropping bombs all over the show now.
Yeah, but I think that comes with passion. When you are passionate about something, you do let, to a certain extent, some, you could say, mannerisms kind of slip, and you've got a perception that you have to talk a certain way, but at times it's like, well, I'm so passionate about that. I've dropped an F-bomb or something like that. I've had my French in there, and people will get a little bit, you could say, PC about it, but it's like, well, I don't always talk like that all the time, so it's it's not necessarily a slip of the tongue, but it's because it's passionate, it's going to come out.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably like a big part of being authentic as well, isn't it? Which is, again, a big part of our do we say, like, an evolution of becoming who we are? Like, I see it as something that every single day, the more that we can show up and speak our truth, you're like giving yourself the permission card, like, yes, this is me, no holding back, I can just be who I am, and kind of keep moving forward.
But coming back to that story, Carol-Ann, but you talked about being beneath other people. Why did you have that, we'll call it, assumption of yourself? Why did you have this illusion that you weren't necessarily, and don't quote me on this, but being somewhat not as good as somebody else, so to speak?
Yeah, totally a perception, like complete perception. And I know that to be true now, but Jesus, it took me nearly my entire life up until I was like 28, 29 to actually realize that to be true. I'd say it definitely started from being a kid, like hearing other kids that sort of say, oh, well, I'm going to go to university, or I'm going to do this, and sort of asking other people as well, and seeing the likes of performers, knowing that they go to certain schools in London, knowing that they have to go through all of this rigorous training to come out the other side. And none of my family still to this day has ever been to uni. So the word university has never got spoke. I just never heard it. So I always had this thing of like, well, that's just who we are, which is so cool. Like, we had the best upbringing. And then other people, if they can afford to, if they're clever enough, I had all these limitations that only go to uni if you've got a certain amount of money, only go to uni if you're like a level of intelligence, and I just kind of wrote myself off. I was like, nope. But luckily, I'm going to say I had something in me that was a bit tenacious, and I was like, right, well, I don't have what they have, but if I work my butt off, then I could get to where they are by the time they finish uni. I can just work really hard, and that's what I'll do. So I had this kind of graft mindset, I'd say, and that was the way that my family brought me up. It was like, if you want something, you work hard for it. That's it. So that's kind of where I came from with that.
Yeah, but most people listening to this would say that's kind of a northern mentality anyway, of having that grafting mentality. I'm going to work as hard as, say, my forefathers to get where I need to get to. Whereas, and I'll say this because it's a matter of fact, I think there's that stereotypical viewpoint in the UK where the North and the South don't get along because of this predisposed ideology. Well, the North operate like this, and so to speak, you could say the South sees themselves slightly better than the rest of the country because it's where power resides. But you're thinking, well, to a certain extent, from probably a mental perspective now, where you're in a state of comfort because you have this ideology that you are superior to the rest of the country. The rest of the country is willing to put in the hard yards, so they are in a sense they are growing, and they are very much in a state of growth, whereas you're more inclined to, and this is generalizing because not everybody in the southeast or in the south of the country is going to be like this, are going to be in this state of comfort. You're content with where you're at because you've got the luxuries.
Yeah, and again, I think that this is, well, it's all based on perception, isn't it? So if we share this perception, whereas people down south might have a completely different perception, and we all, whatever we perceive to be true is true to us, right? Isn't it? So if we live by those rules, then we'll find that reality. And it's so each to our own. Yeah, and I know what you mean. And like I said, that shaped my entire belief system and educational system, and where I ended up, how I went about it. But like I said, it wasn't until like my real late 20s that all of a sudden I was like, hang on a minute. So because then I started, when I went into the coaching realm, let's say, when I did end up switching my career, I still had that belief. I suddenly believed, oh, well, I need to work extra hard as a coach because I didn't go to university to study psychology. So I just changed that belief from the fitness and the dance and all that lot to fit in my view of the world, my map of the world, to be a true coach and mentor. I have to, and all of a sudden, like, hang on a minute, no, I'm seeing the most incredible results, getting referrals, doing this, doing that. And it was like a big perception shift of, hang on a minute, you don't have to have these certain society boxes ticked to do something and get a result in a certain way. It's like the biggest bullshit rule that I ever had, and I was carrying it around for like nearly 30 years, man. It was tiring. So it's been very freeing, let's say, to release that belief.
But does that necessarily be a case of, you have a predisposed ideology of, and this is probably, you'd agree to some extent, certain extent, it is prededicated on the fact that you've previously experienced something. But on the one hand, you said that you had that ideology that, I can't be a good coach because I've not been to university. Yeah, but in a sense, psychology is a study of life. So it comes down to life, not life expectancies, but your actual journey that you've had to overcome. So in a 100%. Sense, it's only, well, I've been to university, and I wouldn't say it. So I'm only the second person in my family that's been, right, through the actual. I can't think what the word is. Not in a circle of family, but close knit circle. So it'd be myself and my aunt. My mother didn't go to university, but, and this will probably go nicely with what you said, I probably when it first went, I had this ideology that because I've gone to university, I'm very much better than, say, my mother that didn't. But then once I've actually gone for full circle and listened to what she said, and said, it comes down to my mum and aunt would have this disagreement with why she was getting passed over for job promotions. Well, the people that are getting the jobs have got the experience. So it comes down to, yes, you've got this piece of paper and you're able to pass exams, and there's no passing judgment to people that have gone to university either. But I would agree, it's very much, yes, it's a good tool to utilize to grow as a person. And I very much, if it's the right thing for you to do to go to university, by all means go and do it. But if it's not for you, there's no hard.
Okay. Yeah.
It's doing what's right for you. So it's very much, I've seen both sides of the coin, where I probably learned to some degree a lot from my education, but I was able to utilize it and put it into my sport. So I very much threw it backwards and forwards. Well, I'll utilize psychology into sport, and everything else I learn in sport, I can look to throw into the degree and utilize it from that perspective. So it's using that actual journey and your actual day in, day out expectancy to actually propel yourself as an actual person, as opposed to predisposing your ideology of, well, I must follow this trend of going to higher education.
Absolutely. And like you said, it has to be right for the individual. That was just my view, my belief that kind of shaped who and what I did. And then as soon as I actually realized how much of a hindrance that was, that's when I really was like, whoa, I need to like step back from this, because I believed that, like I said, I could only achieve a certain amount. But really, I was like, hang on. And then when I really took stock and the power of all the stuff that I'd been through in life that got me to where I was today, like, oh my God, nothing could have taught me that. I couldn't sit an exam to learn how to let go of a dangerous relationship, or how to, when absolute shit hits the fan and you are out on stage or you are out on field, like you are doing what you are meant to be doing, and something goes horrendously wrong. Like, you can't be prepared for that unless you're like in the battlefield. Do you know what I mean? And I'd say I've definitely got a few scars and wounds, but they're like your badge of honor. It's like, yeah, cool, I got through that. Now I can help other people with that. I can relate so much more from that kind of life experience.
But do you also think that that tenacity that you've, well, to a certain extent, learnt from your parents has given you a greater sense of, like we talked about earlier in the episode, of overcoming for you more personally, being that anxiety, fear and stress of obviously losing your best friend to cancer, and then your stepfather to suicide. Do you think because you had that tenacity built in with you, once you actually kind of hit that fork in the road, you were then best prepared to be able to, well, I'm not going to let it dwell upon me.
Yeah.
I need to find where I need to go.
Good question. Okay, I'm actually going to say no, only because the way that I kind of, I mean, like I said, I had like the best childhood. It was one of those where there was never really a time limit. You go out and you come back when it's dark, and just don't do anything stupid kind of thing. So we just kind of like, we were out climbing trees, we were doing this, and both my parents worked really hard full time. They now both work in the NHS, and I am like the black sheep of the family, basically, because I wanted to perform and write songs, and then now I'm doing psychology, and I'll get up on stage and I'll do big public speaking, and they're like, where the frick were you even, like where have you come from? Because it's so far away from what they did. But I'd actually say that, because I kind of got, like, both my parents have kind of struggled with their own mental health over the years. And where my tenacity, I would actually say, really came into place was, okay, how do we keep things going? How do I make them still smile? How do I keep the family up? How do I do? And that wasn't just me, like all of us came together. Like, you don't really know your roles until you look back, do you? But I'd say it was almost that thing of, I wanted to make sure everyone was okay. And I just took it on as my responsibility from a real young age. And as much as both my parents did, I just had this weird thing that I was like, I really want to be able to see everyone happy. I just had this built-in thing where, like, life is happiness. And I don't know where it came from, but it was like, I don't ever want to see anyone hurt. If I ever saw my mum upset, if she was having going through a struggle time, it was like, right, how do I change this? Because if I got upset with her, it's not going to help anyone. And I'd say that actually having that as a background, then when I did lose my friend to cancer, I was like, right, okay, I either have to go down with her, or how the hell do I carry that torch that she had? Like, I want to, because she just lit up the world. I'm like, how do I carry that forward rather than sit with that? Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And it was the same when I lost my stepdad. It was like, oh my God, now I really get the power of the mind, because the mind led him to do something that no one could have predicted. And it was like, right, okay, again, I can either go down and be victim and be depressed and wonder why and feel guilty. And I went through a massive barrage of those emotions, and it was like, I might not be here tomorrow. So how do I help other people realize that happens, that if we don't sort this out up here, like, that shit's real, like, and it's so easy to spiral. So again, I'd almost say it was the tenacity for happiness, if that's a real thing, was just kind of there. And it's really served me well, I'd say, over the years. I've been through my own mental traumas, do I say. I've put myself in some real sticky positions before and self-doubted and not thought I was good enough for years. And then to kind of come through the other side and be like, oh, it's okay to be yourself. You haven't got to prop the world up, if you like. And if you just focus on you, you can then empower others. That's kind of how it did the 360, I'd say.
But is it also, and kind of going beyond your point, having that kind of mentality of wanting to contribute to others, having this notion of, instead of looking to help people, it's looking to serve, and giving people from that perspective, and like you said, carrying the torch forward. It's kind of that, oh gosh, I can't remember the quote, kind of giving the notion of carrying it forward, and it came back to me then, having that ideology of looking at it like that way, with a kind of like you said, that happiness is very much a positive vibe of looking to contribute in that sense, as opposed to dwelling on things and letting them probably 100%. Consume yourself.
100%. Like every day, I mean, it's is it Deepak that says, and I used to find this really hard to say. I actually had a discussion about this the other day. In Buddhism, one of their big sort of things that they discuss and really live by is actually depression. A depressed mind is a selfish mind. And when I first heard this, I was sat and I know, honestly, and I was sat listening to this Buddhist monk. I was at a retreat and I heard him say that, and I took my dad with me. This was when he was going through like a big transition, and he's like a different person. It's so incredible. And in my head, I was like, holy crap, has he actually just said that? Like, that is probably the most awful thing I think I've ever heard. You can't say that to someone that may potentially be struggling with depression. Like, you're not actually depressed, you're just selfish. Like, what? My mind was blown. And it took me, I'm going to say that must be about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So it's suddenly, recently been like the penny dropped. And it isn't saying that if you're depressed, you're selfish. Because sometimes people say about suicide, it's a selfish act. And I'm like, it's not. We each come into this world. It's not our choice to come in. But technically, if we're really not happy, we have a choice. Like, the power of life is choice, right? It's not something I'd ever say, but at the end of the day, we have to honor people's choices. It's something that's part of life. But what I took from that Buddhist monk saying that was, when we are depressed or when we're anxious, where's our mind? We're not focused on helping thy neighbor or focused on helping someone off the street or an old lady cross the road. No, we are in our own minds. We are either living in the past, we're worried about the present, or we're focusing on a future that hasn't happened yet. And I can't remember what it was, but also it was like, oh, I get it. Because if I ever feel depressed, it's because I'm going, oh, what have I done wrong? How do I help this? What if someone doesn't like me? What if someone judges me? What if that doesn't look right? Me. And I'm like, whoa. How I got out of depression and anxiety was, like you said, hold that torch and focus outwards. So now if I ever do get in a bit of a funk, which we all kind of do from time to time, I've got like a whopping toolkit of stuff to use. First thing I will do, and I'm like not even kidding you, it's like, right, I'm going to donate a £5 to charity, or I'm going to bake something and I'm going to take it around to my elderly neighbours. And it sounds really cheesy and probably quite stupid, but instantly you're not focused on you. And the feeling that you get from helping others, the same in the workplace. If you're able to make a difference and help someone, like, you're not going to go home feeling like, oh, I'm a waste of life, or I feel like this. No, you're seeing that difference, and it's like the reciprocation, if that makes sense.
Or would you go a step further and say it's a sense of instant gratification?
Oh God, yeah. When I'm baking cookies for my elderly next door neighbor, like, technically that's a selfish act. That's instant gratification of, I'm going to go around, I'm going to see them happy, I'm going to get them all cute and looking at, oh my God, yes, I feel better. Cool. Now, I'm not going to say that that is the way forward for like everything. Far, far from. And that is very much an instant gratification thing. But in terms of the general big thing, like in general in life, when we are focused on ourselves and we are feeling depressed or feeling anxious, try helping someone, try looking outside of yourself, try making a difference. Because I mean, I work with a big group in Macclesfield of recovering addicts. And we get them out in the community all the time, and they are helping. They're doing cake sales, they're doing charity swims. Why? Because they're learning how to be outside of just their own problems and their own doings. It's like a big part of healing.
But and probably coming back from your background in we'll call it performance, because it's performing arts and very much an athletic background, isn't that very difficult to have that sense of instant gratification? Because we are, and I'll put myself into that little bubble as well, that instant gratification to some extent doesn't exist within sport because of it being, I'll throw fitness in there as well, of that cutthroat nature of its existence.
Yes. And I think you'll agree as well with sport and with performing arts and fitness. Bam. If you're performing, you might do one song, you might do an hour show, then it's done. And you get the crowd, or if you're running a race, or if you're swimming, like whatever the sport is, you put so many hours like behind the scenes into it. So then when you're out on the field, let's call it, on the stage, it might be over in like 5 minutes. So that, yeah, absolutely. Like that instant gratification, it's definitely not something that I would ever suggest to live by. It's definitely a good way to change state, to know that we have that. But I think that's why it's so important to have that balanced mindset, because if we're always waiting, which I work with some performers as well, like they call it like little celebrities kind of thing, and they can go down the drug route, they go down the alcoholism, they go down gambling, sex addiction. Why? Because they love the hit that much. So when they're on field, when they're out on stage, that life feels flat after. So if we live only for those instant gratifications, I'm going to say we're going to reach a point where we could be doing things that are harmful. Whereas if we appreciate the behind the scenes, like the 95% of the time that we have to dedicate, then we find that balance ourselves. We don't always need that, you're great, you're this, you're that, to them. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of finding that balance in between. But yeah, you're so right, because if you're doing like we said, the sport, the fitness, the on stage, you're not on it for a whole day. Like it can be over in a shot, and you've got to be okay with that. Like that's just a part of the process.
So that probably ties in nicely to my penultimate question to you, Carol-Ann, then. So how would you get somebody to change or challenge their perception of their mindset then?
To challenge their perception of their mindset. So can you give me like a context? So is there a certain, would there be like a certain thing that they're in?
Well, if we come from the perspective that we spoke about mostly in the episode, would be probably a state of, be it anxiety, depression, stressful state. How do they, in your opinion, come out of that behavior?
Okay, so first things first, if I was to sort of give like a little step-by-step thing, I would always say recognize where you are, like what's your reality. So because sometimes we can be so wrapped up in our own heads that it's like marbles crashing about the place. We feel like there's a million different problems, million different plates in the air spinning, where actually if you know exactly where you are, who you are is a massive thing, but I'll come on to that after. But really know your reality. So if you have a load of things going on in your mind and you feel depressed, you feel anxious, actually write down what those worries are. And then you can actually see they don't tend to be more than 2 to 3 things. They may be big things, don't get me wrong, but it's scattered into 1,000 different things in the mind. So really know your reality, like fact. How many people have you ever heard say, oh my God, literally, my world fell apart when this happened? The world cracked, it fell apart. But to that person, I know this because bloody hell, I used to say this all the time. Like, to that person, their entire world fell apart. And if they hold on to that belief, like, that is hard to put back together, your entire world. That's not the reality. That isn't fact. If they were to actually look and say, okay, yeah, my bills aren't being met, I might get my car taken off me, and my relationship's not going very well, let's say, for instance, then the next step would be, like, what would your ideal reality look like? So again, sort of bringing it back around, let's say, to the fitness or like the performing arena. If someone is feeling down about their career or where they currently are, like, know your reality, and then what would that ideal reality look like? Because sometimes, again, people will say, well, I'm just sick of not being put onto the team, or I am just sick of my trainer doing something that's not happening, or I'm sick of us not getting shows, or I'm sick of not getting picked for this. Okay, that's what you don't want. So guess what we're going to attract more of? We get what we focus on. So getting real clear on what you do want. What does that ideal reality look like? And then I'm going to use the word simply. It would then either be look to find someone to help you to do this, or navigate it yourself. And that would be work backwards. So from the gap between your current reality to where you are, what does that bridging the gap look like? Is that hiring a new coach or mentor? Is that looking after your physical or mental health better? If so, what does that look like? And then breaking it down until you have actionable steps. And once you have actionable steps, know when you're going to do it. It's that commitment then. So knowing that you are greater than your current reality, I would say, is a big thing.
And my final question to you before we wrap up the episode is, if you had to summarize what we've been speaking about today into one sentence for people to take away, what would that be?
Oh, I think I just said it. It would be, know that you are greater than your current reality. Like, wherever you are right now, you have greatness within you, and you can always develop that further.
I think that's a great one to end on. So, Carol-Ann, thanks again for coming on the Mindset Athlete podcast.
Thank you for having me.
The pleasure's been all mine. If you like this episode, please do share it with your friends, and do let Carol-Ann and I know what you thought of the episode by tagging us over on Instagram at Carol-Ann Reid Coach and at James O. Roberts 11. You can do the same again on Twitter and Facebook. And do check out her #1 selling book, The Woman I'm Becoming, and tune into her radio show, Feel Good Friday, on 102.8 FM. And once again, do check out my free content at fitamputee.co.uk/free-resources. Make sure to check those out. The links will be in the description. You can find all the show notes at mindsetgame.lipsum.com under the category Psychology. So once again, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next week for another episode of the Mindset Athlete podcast.